This is an instructional video to show you a technique to remove noise from the background of a bird photograph, or I guess it would work on any photograph. And it's a technique where you need the bird to be sharp, and maybe you had to use a lot of ISO to make the photograph, but in order to make the bird sharp you end up with a noisy background. And I learned this technique from a Canadian couple who called themselves the Bird Nerds. This is what their YouTube page looks like, and I highly recommend you checking them out. I'll leave a link in the description to go straight to their page, but this is what it looks like, and they're really good. So check them out when you get a chance. But here we have, as you can see, this I made this picture of this osprey nest, and there's the osprey on the nest looking at me. I actually took this photograph, or made this photograph, from a boat, and there's the little baby osprey in the nest, and the osprey's looking at me, and I've already edited this photograph. I got everything just how I want it to look, as good as I can. But as you can see, especially if I go in closer, there's a ton of noise in the background. Of course, there's a lot of noise on the bird too, but I really need that to get the bird nice and sharp. And the noise in the bird itself doesn't bother me when I look at the image, but the noise in the background does. So what you can do, and like I say, I learned this from the Bird Nerds, you can go to Photo. I'm in Lightroom right now. You go to Photo and create a virtual copy. And now you can see this is the original, and I'll arrow over to the right, or maybe the left. There's one, and there's two. They're both already cropped the same way, edited the same way. So what I'm going to do with the second one is I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to take all the sharpening out, and I'm going to take the noise reduction and just run it up to 100. When I do that, it takes all the sharpness out of the bird, which is not good, but it takes all the noise out of the background. So now I have two versions. I have this noisy version, and this not so noisy version. So now what can we do with those? Let's go to let's go to Photo, Edit in Photoshop. And my computer's kind of old, so it's not the fastest thing in the world, but that should be throwing that first picture into Photoshop slowly but surely. There we go. There is the noisy version in Photoshop. And then we'll go back to Lightroom, and we'll click on the not so noisy version and do the same thing. Edit in Photoshop. So now we have two versions of it here in Photoshop. And we're going to click on this tool right here, which is the move tool, and then we can take this noise reduced version and drag it technical difficulty, please stand by. There we go. Let me start over. There's the noiseless version. Pick it up. I've pressed the button, and I'm dragging it over here. Then I'll lay on top of that. And there we go. Now we can drop it. I think I've done too many. We'll get rid of that one. So now we'll move it down to where it's directly on top. Let's get rid of this layer where I've done it twice. We'll delete that layer. So now we have the background layer, which if I make this top layer, which is the noise reduce layer, if I make it invisible, you can see there's the noisy version and there's the not so noisy version. So let's click on the not so noisy version and we'll click right here, and that'll make a layer mask. There it is. And then I'm going to highlight the layer mask and hit Command I, and that'll invert the layer mask. So now the layer mask is black. It's letting everything from the background come through. And then if we paint in white, I'm using the paint tool and I'm using white as the color, and we're painting on this layer mask. Let's see if we can make our brush pretty big. Now you can see as I'm painting, it's getting rid of the noise. And how it's doing that is by, and you can see the white over here, white lets this layer come through, black lets this layer come through. White, this layer, black, the layer behind it. So we want to color white on all the background to get rid of the noise, but not on the bird itself. We want the background version of the bird that's nice and sharp to come through. So let's continue to paint. And this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you do want to do the best you can to get rid of all the noise. And you can look at the layers. As soon as you get done painting, you can see, like right here, it looks like I've missed some area. And down here. And now I'll make my brush a little smaller and continue a little finer detail. But as you can see, or hopefully you can see on YouTube, I can definitely see it in front of me here, that the bird is still nice and sharp, and now the background is nice and out of focus like it already was, but it's also not noisy. You don't notice the noise on the bird itself unless you get up and look at it in 100% mode, but in just regularly looking at it, you really don't notice the noise that much. I like to get all these little background spots down here even, although the noise is not as noticeable in these areas. It's pretty noticeable here. Let's paint all that noise out. And here. And if you go over a little bit onto this wood, it doesn't matter. You don't want to get the bird itself. You don't want to go over on it, because that's what you want to be sharp. That's your subject. That's what you want to be looking at in the picture. You want the background to be as little distraction as possible from what you're actually trying to show. And that is this awesome osprey, raptor, seahawk if you will, on its nest with the little chick, and giving us the stare down. So that's how you do that. And then of course then you would save it, and then you'd have your final product. You know, and this technique may also work if you have if you didn't blur your background enough. You may be able to use this technique to put a ton of noise reduction on your background, and it will blur it some more as well. Although in this particular situation, I did get the background plenty out of focus. It's just too noisy. So try that technique sometime, and maybe leave me a comment and see if you like it. But once again, I learned this technique 100% from the Canadian couple who call themselves the Bird Nerds. Have a great day. Go make some pictures.